Now that we have talked about creating points and how objects work in Rhino and Grasshopper, let's talk more about how we work with different components to create a definition. So we are on the canvas, we have created points. Let's say we want to create a definition that just moves a point. Let's take this point and move it. You will see here there's so many panels. Which one would I go to find the move component? Well, instead of searching through the different panels, what you could do is just double click on the canvas and you can search for a specific component. Now, this might get a little confusing because some of the components have the same names as some of the commands, but they're not the same. So let's go in and talk about this a little more. If I type in move, you will see there is a move component available here. And one thing to note here is when you type in a keyword, the one closest to where you search for that word, the one closest to it, is the closest match. And then as you go further up, you will get other matches which are not as close to that word. So of course, close to move, you will have move away from, move to plane. So these are words or their components that have the word move in it, but of course the closest match is the move component. Now this move component, if you don't know where to find it, you could hold the Control and Shift key, and then you click on the component, and nothing happens because it's not Control Shift, it's Control Alt. See, I get confused as well sometimes. So if you hold Control and Alt on your keyboard and then click on any given component, it will tell you where it is, where it can be found. Now, if you hold your left click, you will see it highlights it with the red arrows and you can see exactly where it is. Now, sometimes it gets a little bit more confusing because some of the components may be hidden not just within a panel but within one of these sub-panels. So some of these panels can actually be expanded to give you additional components. Now to get back to what I was saying earlier about components not being the same as commands, let's say I want to move a point, the point that I have created here, and I want it to go up to 5 by 5. Now an easy way to do that would be to just give it numbers from 5. Well, you would just create a number 5 and connect it to the x and to the y. But let's say we want to keep this point and we want to move the point from the origin to another position to have 2 points. Maybe we want to create a line in between the two. Well, you will see here when I move the point, when I connect this point to the move component, nothing happened. And that's because this component takes 2 inputs, the first one being the geometry. So this is okay, it's a point. But then the second one will be where do you want to move it to? So from where it is to where is that? And so you can define this position by using what's called a vector. So the icon you see at the top that says motion T, that's actually a vector. Now, this input can be different things. For example, you could move it by the same amount of distance as a reference point. And so if you do that, it will actually move the point up here. So in this case, it moved it by the coordinates of the reference point, which was, well, it was here. So it moved it on top of the reference point. So that's one way to do it. You could move it by x, y, and z coordinates. But a more common way to move a point would be to use the x or y move command, which is, it's basically a vector, like I said. And so this one would be unit x. And of course, you're going to find it under the vector panel because it is a vector. It would be here, yes, under vector, under the drop down. And you have different ways to move objects. So these are good options, but typically when you move something, you would move it on the x, y, and z. And if you want to move it both on the x and the y, you could simply use a point and move it by the inputs. So let's connect the x to the T. T stands for translate, so you're transforming it. Actually, yeah, it's transform, not translate. Translation. Oh yeah, it is translation. Translation. So it's a translation vector, and here by default it will be moved by 1. So if we want to change that number, what we can do is use a slider. So the slider is going to be found here under parameter, and you can click on this number here, which is the number slider, and if you click on the canvas you will have a number, and the number ranges from 0 to 1. So if I connect this slider to the X component, you can see it will move that point from where it was here all the way up to 1. Now, from 0 to 1, that's a very short range. It's a small range. So what if I wanted to move it much further on the X-axis? Well, there are two ways to do that. One would be to edit the number slider, and this can be done here. You can double click on the slider, the number slider, and you can give it a name. So if you give it a name, it will change this name here that says factor. Let's say we'll call it move X. So this will change that name here once we press OK. And we can change it to, let's say we don't want it to be 0.000, we want it to be a whole number. So you can press on N to do that, or you can say I want it to be rounded to 1 unit, so this will do the same thing. Let's say we want it to be rounded to 1 decimal place, and we want to change the maximum to 10, and the minimum can stay at 0. Now, if I move the slider, you can see it goes from 0 to 10, and if I wanted to, I can make it, let's say, 4.5. So now you have 1 decimal place, and you can move it anywhere between 0 and 10 using this input. So as you can see, this input cannot be connected to other components. It's an input only. It only has one output, and that's to allow this number to be inputted into other components. So other components can input the number slider, but the number slider only has an output, no input. So that's essentially how the components work, but one of the things I really wanted to highlight in this demo was that there is a big difference between moving in Rhino using the move command and using a component, which in this case is called move. So some of the components have the same name, but they may not work the same way. So that's something to keep in mind. Now in this case, if you want to move an object, you can still move it, but you have to use a translation and you have to define the input for the translation. Now what that does as well is it allows it to be very dynamic, because if you want to make a change here, you can change it and anything that follows will also change. But in Rhino, if you move a point, depending on what you're doing, it may not update all of the rest of the geometry. So hopefully this makes sense, and this gives you a better sense on how you use inputs to create geometry or to create your definition.